Well, all right, here we are live streaming today. My name is Tom Dutta, and I'm the host of the Quiet Warrior Show. Well, we're live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Now, a little bit about live streaming, everybody. We're literally letting you peek into the studio as we record this epic interview, which will be released in the future as a YouTube premiere video and an international podcast. I'm delighted to have on the show today two special guests, Katie Mahon and Joan Hill. Katie and Joan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for having us.
All right, you're welcome. And now, just looking at my notes here, so pardon me when I turn my head on you. Uh, one of you's in Denver, Colorado. One of you's in California. I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia. So truly, the miracle of technology. And so, welcome to the show, Katie. What are you doing down in Denver, Colorado?
Well, it has been a year since I have seen my 4-year-old and 3-year-old grandsons. And so as soon as my husband and I were past the 2 weeks, past the second shot, we hopped on an airplane. And so we're here for a few weeks.
Well, that's fantastic. We were talking offline about grandchildren, and that was a good way to start the show, I think, because we're really time stamping it. We are in a pandemic, and everything has changed, and well, thank goodness that you're able to see your granddaughter. Let me just tell everybody who I have here. I want to read something about the two of you. And everyone, we're going to talk about a book today called The Miracle Collectors. Now, if that doesn't get you excited, the title certainly got my attention. And we'll start with a little bit about Joan Hill. Joan's introduction to miracles evolved as a series of coincidences that ultimately could not be ignored. She has a lengthy career in medical administration, advancing innovative medical solutions. Her expertise was put to the test to save the life of her son. She has a master's degree from the University of Connecticut and a Bachelor of Science degree from Boston College. Lived in a number of states with 3 adult children and a family that spread across the country. And Hill and her husband are avid and constant travelers. Well, that's a little bit about the depth behind Joan. Let's talk about Katie for a minute. Katie became a miracle expert the hard way. At 19, she walked away from the serial killer Ted Bundy. Wow. With the help of a stranger who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Mahon has a Bachelor of Science degree from Santa Clara University, spent nearly 20 years in banking before staying home with her 2 daughters. A transplant from San Francisco Bay Area. She now lives in New York City with her husband and enjoys chasing more than miracles with her 4 children. Now, I know those are bios out of the book, everyone, but I wanted to read it for a reason. Every time I read a bio, by the way, Katie and Joan, something just hits me as a coincidence. I'm spent a third of my career in banking, so I saw the word bank, and I married a banker. So there you go, another mini miracle story that happened. Well, let's start off with the big word. I'm going to put it out there, and I'll ask one of you to comment on it, and that's the word miracle. Now, you've written a book called The Miracle Collectors, as we mentioned, and the first thing I did is I went to my skeptical brain, and then I went to my rational brain and my dreaming brain, and I thought, so I went and Googled it, and Google says that a miracle is basically something or an event or circumstance that can't be proven naturally or by science. And then I went and read your book. And I just want to read one more thing, and then I'll be quiet for a few minutes. On page 3 in the book, and if I just find it here for a minute, page 3. One of you hold up that wonderful book you have there. Thank you, Joan. The Miracle Collectors. There you have it, everybody. It says 80% of Americans say they believe in miracles, which is very interesting. And then on page 11, and I'm referring to these pages for a reason, because I know people, I'm going to recommend they get this book. They give it a high rating to support your work. It says on page 11, in our first book, we share a definition of miracles that we developed through research and of our own experience. A miracle is a sign of divine intervention in the world that creates an unfolding and beneficial connection between God and humankind. The notion that miracles unfold is unique. They burrow their way into your soul over time and ripple outward into perpetuity. Being open to the possibility of miracles is the first step. Wow. Well, let's start there. I would like to hear your story. Let's start with you, Katie. There's a little bit of a miracle that happened in your life. Let's hear about that.
Well, I'll start a little ways into the story, just not to make it quite so long. But when I was 19 years old, I was working in San Francisco, in downtown San Francisco. It was the summer after my freshman year in college. And I was lured into a hotel conference room on a mezzanine floor that I thought would be crowded with people, but it wasn't. It was deserted. And here I am in this deserted conference room with a stranger who had been very persistent and charming. He was, maybe 10 years older than I was. And he said he needed help. And he had had eye surgery. He needed to look up his best friend's parents in the phone book. And I had agreed to accompany him to the hotel, like I said, because I thought it would be crowded with people. There was a payphone in the back of this long rectangular conference room. And underneath it on a metal shelf, of course, was a phone book. This was the olden days, 1975. And I'm facing the wall where the payphone is and looking down several columns of brown, looking for a Brown family that lived on Marina Boulevard. And, maybe a minute goes by and all of a sudden a just overwhelming feeling of terror came over me. It wasn't like I went through a checklist. It was this instantaneous recognition that there was no patch on his eye. He didn't know the first name of his best friend's parents, and that's how you looked up a common name back then, back in the day. Why would he have asked me? And there were certainly plenty of people in the hotel that could have assisted him. And I just realized that I was in this deserted room with a stranger, what I'd been taught my entire life not to do. And I was terrified. And I turned around and his entire demeanor had changed. His eyes had gotten dark. And he knew that I was in big trouble. And that was what he was waiting for. And just as he starts to make a move towards me, there's this movement at the door, and a bellman walks in and says, "Don't you think you should be going now?" And I walked out of the room with the bellman. The man didn't follow. We walked down the hallway. The elevator doors were open. We go down to the lobby, which of course was crowded with people. It took me a few seconds to get my wits about me and think I should thank this man, but he was nowhere to be seen. So I went home. I told my mom what had happened. She instantly went to the idea that this bellman was an angel. I wanted no part of a spiritual explanation. And, I was just in that late teenager. I don't want anything to do with religion. I'd grown up in a lovely Catholic family, but it just wasn't where I was at the time. And 15 years went by, and I tried very hard to tell myself that there wasn't a spiritual explanation for what happened. And, a handful of times I had a nightmare. This man's face would be at the end of this nightmare, and I'd wake up and my heart pounding. And then one day, 15 years later, my husband and I are in bed, and he hands me the front page of the newspaper and says, "Oh my God, Katie, I think this is your guy."
Wow.
And
that's
yeah.
incredible. Katie, first of all, we want to honor you for being vulnerable and sharing that incredible story live on streaming here, but also in writing it in the book. And I my head went on a journey somewhere else. So Joan, if you'll just give me a moment, because I want to get to your testimony in a minute. Everybody, we're talking about The Miracle Collectors. It's a book that Katie and Joan have co-authored, and I asked Katie to tell her miracle story. And the thing I read in your book that really made me think hard is that being vulnerable and sharing your story, first of all, a lot of people won't do that. So I honor you for doing that. But also, as you share your story, you open up others to share theirs. And so here's a couple connections. This is just me sharing with you, which is something that 10, 15 years ago I didn't do very easily. That I have a friend who is a lawyer in the United States, or an attorney, as you call it, who actually was the one who put away Ted Bundy. As you started telling your story and I read the book, I went, oh my God, there's a connection here. And And then I remember watching the movie and just studying and seeing this evil character, and it just blows my mind. Here I am doing my radio show, and you're here, and you're somebody who miraculously survived. That is what the definition. The words that I found on Google were miraculous. I mean, that is all I can say about that incredible story. Uh, let me go to Joan and tell us your miracle story. I know I read a lot about that in the book.
Well, thanks, Tom. So I think that, we're conditioned. Well, miracles are this universal language that we kind of talk about, right? From Miracle on the Hudson and miracles, on ice and miracle products and whatnot. It is an exceptional kind of thing. And we're all taught about these thunderbolt miracles, kind of like, escaping serial murderer Ted Bundy. But what we really came to realize is that miracles are on a continuum. And, they're from these thunderbolt miracles that occur to perhaps a series of coincidences that conspire. And in the case of our family, conspired to save the life of our then 13-year-old son. Our son, who was kind of a super athlete, had one instance of chest pain. And it just so happened that while I had never been at school in the 3 years he had been at this school, at this particular time, I happened to have said yes 6 months earlier to do a particular thing, which placed me at the school at the exact time that he had this chest pain. And we ended up following up with it. And it turned out he had a cardiac anomaly that had never been seen before in a live person, only discovered on autopsy when someone had immediately collapsed. So we went down this path to try to figure out what could happen and what could be fixed, and if it could be fixed or what to do. And so path was convoluted, but suffice it to say, we're now in the hospital operating room, while he was having this 8-hour open heart surgery. And we were distraught because a week before, the surgeon had said he did not think he was going to be able to fix his heart in the way that would last a lifetime. He really thought he was going to have to do a bypass. And, at 13, he was going to be looking at open heart surgery every, 10 to 15 years of his life. And that was, not words you really want to hear. About a couple hours in, Jerry Springer's on the television. My husband and I were as far away from the television as possible. I was paged to the desk, and as I'm paged to the desk, the nurse tells me that it's the most dangerous part of the operation. He's on the heart, coronary bypass machine, and I say, okay, that's great, and hang up the phone. And I hear my name. My maiden name is Luise. I hear Luise being called from the television. I look around, and Jerry Springer is nowhere in sight anymore. There's a movie on, and the movie is The Song of Bernadette, which tells the story of the healing spring at Lourdes, France, which is still a very active shrine today. And the daughter, Bernadette, or the young woman, Bernadette, was 13 at the time that she had these apparitions from the Blessed Mother, and her mother's name was Louise. And people were in the waiting room, what happened? Nobody changed the station. What is this? And as I'm telling them this story, which is my favorite movie as a child, won the Academy Award in the 40s, this feeling of peace that really came over me was quite profound, actually, and not characteristic of me at all, by the way. And as parents left the waiting room as their kids' surgeries were completed, I was left alone watching the credits roll at the end of the movie. And the surgeon came in and he said, I have wonderful news. When I got in, even though I didn't think I was going to be able to do the surgery I wanted to do, the amount of space between his two coronary arteries was there exactly, the width of a nickel. And I was able to fix his heart in a way that should last a lifetime. So the beauty of that story is two beauties of the story. He survived, but two, we really talk about in our definition of a miracle, this notion of the ripple effect. And I think that a miracle is something that goes on and ripples forward. And I'm here and happy to tell you that our son is an emergency physician in Chicago, Illinois, on the front lines of COVID, and certainly his miracle is rippling the lives of others.
Wow. Well, Jones, thank you so much for sharing your story. I got to honor you for doing that and being vulnerable. I do remember in the book, and everybody, I'm just going to hold it up here for a minute and brag about this book because there's so much greatness in it. The Miracle Collectors, there it is. And we'll tell you at the end of the show how to get it. That's really what we're talking about today. And I want to say that as I started reading more about miracles and I was looking at this book, I don't know if you noticed something on the screen there, but if you notice, it looks like there's a hole in the book and my show is inside the book. And what it is this is the first cover I've actually held up where that's happened. Now, let me tell you where my brain went, because I want to make a bold statement here, everybody. And somebody said this to me before, whether you're right or wrong, if you believe or you don't believe in miracles, one thing is absolutely right. You will be right. And so this is all about believing. It's like when I grew up and I had Santa Claus in my life in a home of torture and turmoil. That was my beginnings, a very toxic environment I lived in. Once a year, this person came to the house and left me gifts, and it changed my life. It saved me from the environment that I lived in. And to me, looking back now, I still believe in Santa Claus. I still believe. And when you believe, miracles can happen. So this book, by the way, has a green line in the middle of it through the title. And I happen to have a green screen. So it confuses my studio, and it says, that's a green screen. So it shows that my screensaver, which is the image of the show, is in the book. And this is a mini miracle, because I always say when you come on the show, it's about the hero's journey. It's about storytelling. And the guests, when they leave the show, the show is in you. Well, your book and you are my show is in all of you. So just riffing there on the title of your book, it was quite something. I want to mention something else here before we get to asking permission to share a story that I have. And tell me about why you think some people don't believe in miracles, or some people are skeptical, or sometimes I read in your book somewhere that some people experience more miracles than others. Any one of you want to jump in on that?
Well, go ahead, Joan.
So I think that's, it's interesting. One of the things that really happened to us is we shared our stories, which were told really in our first book, The Miracle Chase, where we looked at miracles and we wanted to understand this whole notion of miracles. We've approached it in a very logical, scientific way. And we've looked at miracles in science and philosophy and theology and cross cultures and found this universality. But when we told our stories, and you're right, Tom, the stories are like the essence, right? People came out of the woodwork to tell their own stories. And many of these stories they had never shared before, or they were, hidden in the back recesses of their brain, because we're not pre-programmed to share those sort of defining moments of our lives. And so it was as if we gave people permission, we gave them the safe environment, we gave them a vocabulary. And when we did that, and as you said, we showed up and stood at the front of the room and sort of said, this is our story. Make of it what you will. Because, we are in the business of just having people become more comfortable and present with their own stories. It resonated with people. And so the Miracle Collectors actually has over 50 different stories in it from other people's experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie?
I was just going to say one thing that I'm pretty sure this was in the Song of Bernadette, which was written by Franz Werfel. I might not be saying, or Werfel. He was an Austrian Jew trying to escape Nazi Germany, and he ended up in Lourdes, France. And he wasn't a believer, but Lourdes really got through to him. And there was one line in the movie about, for those who believe in miracles, no explanation is necessary. And for those who don't believe, no explanation is possible. So I do think there's a chasm. You asked the question about why are some people skeptics? And I don't know that we can bridge that divide necessarily. It's something that I certainly understand a skeptic viewpoint, because there are so many tragic, awful things that happen in the world, and miracles don't come to save the day. So I certainly understand where people are coming from.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. For both of you, that's a deep answer, but I think it's a complex topic. When we talk about miracles, I'm going to hold up another book that I read a lot, and you can see it's got a lot of little bookmarks in it. And this is the Amplified Bible, and so I'm very faith based, and I'll tell you a bit about my story. But in watching The Chosen, which was episode 2 last night, if they're creating a series. On the Bible, and it's one of these epic shows that is out there. And last night watching it, I just remember the whole Bible is about storytelling, and if you're faith based or not, when Christ came, he was a teacher, and if you study what the way the Bible depicts Christ, he's teaching, but he's telling stories, and he's having other people follow and freeing them up, tell their stories. And so one of the reason why I held that up is there's a lot of people are skeptical about religion. And when we hear the word miracle, and I have a lot of experience with brain science, my neural nets are wired with everything anybody's ever said about the word miracle. So depending on what your experiences are and what your frame of reference is, that's where my mind went initially about being skeptical about all the things that I learned growing up. I didn't believe in my faith. Katie, I think you said you're Catholic. I was born and raised and baptized Catholic, and I don't want to bring this on this show to be religious, but it's the context. But I denied my faith. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in Jesus Christ. There was a story, picture on the wall in our home, but for those who follow my show, I was a kid who was abused by my family, and my family broke up when I was younger, and that's where my skepticism of faith and miracles came from. Until beautiful people like you came in my life and started sharing your stories and giving me the courage to share mine. And there's something amazing in the book. I'm just going to go to page number 71, ramble for a few more minutes. It's a quote by a psychologist, Paul Trichler. Stories are part of the fabric of who we are, but only in sharing our life experience do we develop a sense of self. Once we share our stories, our sense of self deepens, bringing us closer to who we are underneath our exterior facade. The whole reason I created the narrative behind my show, Katie and Joan, is I wanted to give people a safe place to come and tell their stories.
Mhm.
I was a young man who couldn't tell my story. I lived in shame and fear, and for all my life it ruled me. Even when I became a CEO, I was in business running companies. I just couldn't see the good in myself. My self-worth was nowhere. And when I started hearing other people and being mentored by people like yourself to tell my story, I got more courage. And bringing out my true story, I actually discovered over 10 years the true meaning of my life, what my purpose is, who I am.
Mhm.
So I want to take a moment now just to tell you a very quick version of my story, seeing that you brought it out in me through the conversation. And this is just a chapter of my story, but in August 2018, I was riding a bicycle, 225 kilometers for the Ride to Conquer Cancer. A friend of mine his daughter who died from leukemia when she was 11, and my wife had a childhood friend who died middle-aged from leukemia. And I'm just one of those people, do something each year, something different, give back. Didn't have a bike, borrowed it from a friend of mine, went and did the ride. First 120 kilometers, amazing. I was in peak condition. And my wife and I, she was with me, and we stayed in a motel that our team captain put us up in. You have to understand there were 80 riders on our team, but 2,000 people on bicycles that day. And you talk about looking around at many, many miracles. When we went out of the starting gate, I remember they had the cameras from TV and everything. It was like 6 a.m. The sun was coming up. And they said, look to your left and look to your right and see all the people on bikes with yellow flags. They said those people are either battling cancer now or they've survived cancer. I was blown away. From that moment on, I never complained about my life. So I'm riding on the ride, by the way, in the first 100 kilometers. And then this guy passes me. He's like probably 85 years old. And at first I'm going like, excuse me? You just passed. Yeah, you just passed me. What the heck? And then I see this flag on his bike and I'm going like, holy, this guy's either battling cancer or so at the first check it every 20 kilometers, they have the emergency services, the rest break stop for nutrition. I said to him, what's your story? And he was on chemo. He was battling through it and he finished this ride. So
Wow.
that's not the miracle. The miracle is this. The first night we stayed in a motel, I stepped in a bathtub, slipped and fell and cracked a hole in the basin of the tub, blacked out. My wife found me and my life stopped. I had a serious brain injury, uh, at that moment, serious headaches. My eyes weren't working effectively, everything you'd think of. And I remember I slept leaning against the headboard of the bed, and my wife said, "Don't go on the next leg of the ride." And I remember I'm stubborn. I said, "I've got to do it because people had cancer. They didn't have a choice." So I chewed Tylenol and I actually rode very slow and I finished. I didn't know till the day after I got home when my daughter saw blood on my head. She said, "Dad, there's dried blood on top of your head," that I had actually a serious injury. Went to the doctor and was told, "You have this injury." It's 2.5 years later now. On this podcast, I mentioned to you offline that I have double vision. My cognitive abilities are not great, and I haven't really worked in my true executive capacity for a couple of years. So, what was the miracle of that? The miracle, I could say, after reading your book, is that I could have been dead. I survived. So that's one. Number two is, what did I do during that time off? The last part of the story I want to share with you is I did a TED Talk, and I'm not advertising my TED Talk on this show for that reason. But getting concussed is what I believe God stopped me in my tracks and gave me a chance to look deeper into who I really am. And what I discovered is I slipped into depression. I had my first suicidal thoughts. I had anxiety, and I experienced all these weird things, including reconnection with my father, who passed away just months before that. But I decided to go and find out what's the true meaning behind mental health and behind a chapter of my life that I thought was closed, which is coming through trauma. And through all of that, I found a new pathway to go out and tell my story of battling depression and suicide and surviving that, and now coming to terms with the fact that I'm really here. My deeper purpose is really focused on other things, not just what I thought it was. So I want to give it back to you. Just humor me with any comments. Maybe my story maybe could have been a chapter that weaved into your book in some way. But I mean, do you see that as what you've seen in all the interviews you've done of people's stories, where something happens they don't know until after, really what the true purpose in their self is?
I can't speak for Joan, even though she is my soul sister. I can't say for certain, but I know for me, we watched one of your earlier shows, Tom, and you talked about the dark night of the soul. And I think that's really what you're talking about. I think most people can pinpoint some period of time in their life where they experienced something and it forced them to just relook at, you talked about purpose, but also, maybe getting off the hamster wheel, getting off the merry-go-round. I mean, that certainly was one situation for me when I stopped or retired from my banking career. It was crazy. It was crazy trying to be a mom and doing everything. And so, yes, I think your story, it's unfortunate that it had to be so dramatic and so painful. But sometimes I think that's what it takes.
And I think, Tom, one of the things I'd like to just add to that is that, we talk a lot about a couple things, in this last year that we've all encountered with the pandemic and, global crises we've had. It's almost as if we've been forced to have a reset button and really recalibrate, what's important to us. And that's really what the whole third section, is about in this book, is sort of finding this meaning. And how do we perhaps, with what you're doing in some of the mental health areas and telling your story, you can be the miracle for someone else. And so we talk a lot about that being the miracle for someone else. Or, often we think about a miracle as being, asking God to say yes to us, but sometimes we have to say yes. And that saying yes is telling our story and being present for someone. And the other thing that really happens is we can help others find the value in their own lives. We've heard people tell a story that they weren't really sure whether it was significant or not in their life until they heard the gasp of, wonder from their friends, their peers, and they go, oh, you mean my life is really important? You mean I'm really not alone in this? And I think that that's such an important message, especially at this time.
Thank you for both of you for commenting. And Joan, my mind went in a different direction when you said that about mental health. That reading the book, it's true. I think one of the miracles of your book is it helps the reader see through other people's stories something in them, maybe a value in their life or something that was locked away. I think that truly is one of the great things about this book. And back to what I was telling you about my injury, they put me in a classroom for 9 weeks with people who had serious mental illness. It was actually a course I had to take. And so I went to a classroom for an hour and a half, 9 weeks, and people around me had bipolar and depression and other serious issues. And you know what? Their biggest challenge was getting up in the morning, getting to the classroom. But the miracle of that part of my story was my father was a chronic alcoholic and I was estranged from him, but we made peace before he passed away, which was only 6 months before the ride. When I started focusing on mental health and being around people, I started noticing mental health in the world in a different way. Everywhere it appeared. And what was interesting is I came to terms with my father's how he treated me in a different way. My father was pushed off a bridge in Fiji. That's how he learned to swim. His dad was a tough alcoholic. So my dad, I believe, had mental health challenges. He used alcohol as his tool to deal with anxiety and depression and his own stress. He became a man of the family when his dad died. I never looked at my father's story that way. And so I want to just add this one last thing and then give it back to you with a quote from the book that studying brain science, there's a part of the brain, reticular activating system. And you know how sometimes you can not notice something and then all of a sudden, like if I close my eyes and then I say open, I say look for the color red all over my studio here appears. It's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. I'm not telling you, I'm just using it as context from what I know, that when the brain has a powerful filter that it can filter out all the junk, the billions of bits of data, and it can train itself to focus on something. So I start focusing on mental health, and all of a sudden I see that. And that's why I read in the book one thing you both said, which was amazing to me, that why do some people feel they have more miracles than others? And I just really believe, and I love your comment on it, that once you discover the belief and the power of these miracles, and they come in different forms, you've said in your book, I think you start seeing and experiencing more of that, and that really gets into my soul. Comment if you can.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think that one thing that the book is really, it's a book of possibilities, and it takes the reader on a journey with us in the company of these extraordinary stories to look at life with fresh eyes or a different lens. And it really, the whole point is to empower others to find the miracles in their own lives. And so, like you said, once you learn to spot them, once you learn to spot one, they do have kind of a snowball effect. And one of my favorite reviews that we've gotten about the Miracle Collectors, this particular person said it's kind of a spiritual version of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So it really does highlight and focus on the spiritual component of all of us. And I think you have to light the match on that. You have to find the spark of your spiritual self. And I think a lot of us walk around ignoring it. We live in a society that makes that very easy to simply ignore.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. So, Joan, go ahead.
I think that you alluded earlier about this notion of religion and feeling less religiosity, but I think that Katie, what she was talking about was the spiritual side. And while perhaps organized religion has fallen off in a particular way, we still have this need for connection. We still have this need for understanding or recognizing our spiritual side, regardless of how that expresses it. And so, we have these take a miracle moment challenges at the end of each chapter, which are very practical kinds of questions to just think about, from forgiveness to gratitude to noticing what's around you. And we do say, as Katie said, that, miracles are around us. And so in as much as they're free, they're there for the taking, the looking, and it's a wonderful thing.
It really is. You made me smile, and I don't know how you read my mind. There's another mini miracle. I have the book here again. His book is well read in my house, and I love the format. Everybody that Joan just mentioned in throughout the book. There's these take a miracle moment. This one, page 28 stopped me, and I had trouble with it. So I'm going to use it as a teaching moment on the show, if you don't mind. Everybody, that if you're listening, as long as you're safe, if not, you can come back to this. I'm going to read out the statement, and then I want you just to reflect on this. It is called Lifesaver. If you found out you had a week to live, what are the first three things you would do? When the reprieve comes, is there anything you would now change? I got to be honest with you, Joan and Katie, I had trouble with that. In fact, you can probably see here on the page, I had one line and then I stopped. And the thing about that is it really it gave me something to work on. I went deeper, and I want to throw this out as well. I wrote it down on my paper while you were talking. The word spirituality and legacy. And so in the work I do and self-work I've done on myself, we have human needs. We all know many of those. But they say there's two. If there's a couple that if you don't have them anchored in your soul, you can never be fully happy or fulfilled. In other words, all the institutions around us crumble. So the two words are spirituality and legacy. And as I think about this, what's the legacy people can leave to the world to impact the world or impact others? This is it. This is it. Learning to understand your miracle story and to tell that story. And I'm going to be bold and say to everybody has a story. And my wife will be listening to this, and she'll go, there he goes again. Anna doesn't tell her story. And we're working on a book, actually, a fellow author of me and mine, and we've coined the name The Quiet Lady. Although if you meet Anna, she's bubbly and happy. She's Italian. She's this amazing soul, is always talking, yet she has an amazing story from her early years that she never tells. And so I think she's starting to tell her story, and we're thinking more and more about, what can people, including my Anna, do with their stories. So everybody, I just wanted to, with so much passion, throw that out, that the gift of this book is you have to read it, The Miracle Collectors, and read the stories, because I guarantee it'll unlock something in you that says, that's my story. That little nugget is my story, and it'll send you on a journey, do something with it to find out what your true story is and what you can do with it. I want to make one more statement and give it back to you to comment. Brene Brown, I know you know who she would be. She's an American researcher. I came across her work a long time ago, and she said, I think I'm misquoting a bit, but she said something like, tell your story to those worthy of hearing it. And when you tell your story, you can write the next chapter or finish the next chapter. I want to say this, that I've interviewed people, and I am an author, like you. I'm so proud of you too for being an authority on your topic. And there are authors out there that have no self-confidence, and they'll say things like, geez, I don't know if somebody really wants to read my book. And this is the part I discovered, that if one person reads The Miracle Collectors like me and they get something out of it, it moves and changes, you guys, it's a home run. So when I tell my testimony, I don't expect, if I have 100 people in a room, to say, yeah, that's my story. That's not what it's all about, right? It's about impacting one person on the planet at a time. Any of you want to comment?
I think you're exactly right. I think that's what's really kept Katie and I going for these 20 years that we've been working on miracle stories. Is, you wonder, but then you go to an event and you begin to put people together. There was a woman who came to an event. We told her stories. She talked about a book. She told her story about her brother. We were talking about mental illness, who had mental illness and their family struggle, and then this wonderful event that happened, miraculous event that really happened as he passed. And a woman at the end, who was also in the audience, came up at the end of the talk and said, the reason I'm here today is I had to get out of my house. My 15-year-old son is with his father right now, but he was diagnosed today with mental illness, and I don't know what to do. Can we talk? And so you begin to put people together. You begin to see these reasons for people coming together, and you go, okay, this is worth it. Just takes, one thing. We had people, a couple had been married for, over 5 years who did the Take a Miracle Moment challenges together and learned all sorts of new things about each other, which is kind of fun to hear. So share your stories. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I love that there's all these commercials and ads about, start a conversation and in mental health. Well, here you go. Right. This is exactly what we're talking about. We're getting to the end of the time we have together, and I'm saying that there's so much more we can talk about, but I do want to cover one final point from the book, which blew my mind. Actually, it's one of the stories that I read, and I went, "Huh?" And you'll know when I say it, the story of Rose, the Tutsi.
Oh, Rose Mapendo.
Oh
Yeah.
oh my God. Katie, can you just touch on the highlight of that story? The aha, the one that made me go, huh? You know what made me go, huh, I'm sure, but just touch on that so the audience can hear it. And then I want to just talk to you about it.
Yeah, I didn't put in the book that it was difficult for me to understand Rose because she had a heavy accent. And so when we got off the bus that night and I asked her if she named one of her infant sons after her husband who had been tortured and killed, she said, no, I named them after him, after the commander who tortured and killed my husband. And I said, I thought I had not heard her correctly. And she said, in my culture, the only way, and I'm not going to get this right, Tom, I actually have to go back and read the story, but the essence of it was that if I named one of my sons for him, then he could no longer be my enemy. And if he was no longer my enemy, that was my only path to forgiveness. And it was the only thing I knew how to do so that my sons would survive, because it went both ways. If she named her sons for them, then they could not consider her sons their enemies either. And so she wanted her sons to survive. But I think the bigger story there was that she wanted to find a way to forgive, because she understood that was her only way internally to survive. This was the most powerful story I've ever heard.
I mean, I'm not laughing. I'm just like I can relive it in my mind after reading it. Everybody, you heard it told in part by Katie. You've got to get the book Miracle Collectors to actually read the whole story. But it's one of those things. And again, the power of story, power of these mini miracle stories, that it stopped me and gave me a different perspective or a worldview. I know a shift in thinking was absolutely what happened. How would anybody name one of their sons after somebody, a murder or a torture? How is that possible? And it gave me a different perspective. So I want to share something very vulnerable with you. If you look on the screen, you see it says host Tom A. Dutta, my name. Up until not long ago, I didn't have the A there, which is my dad's name. I was shocked. That's my dad's middle name. And it was, when I read that story, my brain went on this journey back to my dad again. It's like my dad was my torturer, but for a long time I kind of hid. But I thought when I discovered forgiveness through my own faith and everything that got me to where I am, including the fall in the tub and all this stuff that happened, I started honoring my father, and I put the A back on my show. And now I talk about his story. I tell my story with my dad in it from a perspective of love and forgiveness, not from a perspective of demons and hatred. That's the power of the threads that connect. They say we're all connected by our threads. Your book, there's one thing for sure. We're all connected by threads in our stories, and I found many threads in there. I guess I just had this last thing I want to throw at you. We're in a pandemic, so you know what? Maybe you have another book in you. We all have one thread in now across the world, that is living through the pandemic. That would be pretty cool. I want to honor you too with some words as we go to wrap up, and then we'll let you have the last word. I write these down as you're speaking. It's not scripted. And these are words of leadership words that I'd like to honor you with. And I've decided today to do them both for the two of you. In other words, the same set of words. So you two are wisdom. There's no question. You two are miracles. You're miracles in the way you touch people in the world with the work you've done, and just the way you're talking. You're both love. Your vulnerability. This is what it looks like, and you're teachers. So congratulations for being on the Quiet Warrior. You're welcome. And I'm going to honor you now by inducting you two into the Quiet Warrior tribe. We do this with those few who come on the show with sharing their vulnerability and having a purpose. So if you can see, I'm going to go to full screen for a minute here and be selfish, block the two of you. You see that little image on the back? That's the screensaver. That is the challenge coin. So I had these handcrafted and painted or minted in the sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I had these handcrafted and painted and produced in the US, sorry, Canada. The challenge coins they come from World War One, and soldiers carried them in their pockets to commit to each other. If you didn't have it, you'd buy drinks, or maybe you'd have to buy dinner. But these grew around the world and are used in so many areas. First responders, as an example, for creating community. When I started my show, I was fearful and petrified of not having enough guests. Now we have 180 people have come and told their story. You two are amazing. And by receiving the coin, the back of it has the hero's journey narrative illustrated. So it's double-sided, comes in a cherry box. By receiving this, you become part of the tribe, which is now in 13 countries, and you commit to continue to do your purposeful work. So welcome to the tribe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
I love
beautiful.
Oh, you're
We're honored.
That's really good.
And I want to show something on the screen now. We're live, so we get people watching. This one comes from LinkedIn. Let's have some fun and put it on the screen. I should have mentioned this when you said it, but Tillich quote really spoke to me. I just listened to Strong Like Water just before that spurred me to think of where my hero's journey began. Inspiration. That's
Wow.
that's somebody who is watching this live stream as we're taping, who had a connection to something. So that's a gift for you too. And now I'm going to give you the last word. Back to you as we wrap up. Tell us how we can get a hold of you, your body of work, your book, whatever you want to tell me.
We can, our website is themiraclecollectors.com. You can buy the book. You can sign up and get our blog. You can tell us your miracle story. We love all of that. But the Miracle Collectors is, it's basically available, on online distributors, and it's also available in your local bookshop. You can ask for it, and we'd love.
It's also
to hear your
audio.
comments.
It's also audio and ebook and hardcover right now. So
Ooh.
Yes, you can find it anywhere.
Fantastic. I love audiobooks. I as an author, I know the value of it. I want us to do something fun here because I'm crazy today. Hell, everybody hold up their books the same time on the screen. Okay, so there you go. Come on, hold your books up. Everybody, there they are in triple play, The Miracle Collectors. What an amazing book, and what amazing authors, Katie Mahon, Joan Hill. And I'd like you all who get the book to write a review for it. Now, most people don't know how authors get known is by having reviews written, posted on Amazon or posted on Goodreads, wherever you want to honor this work. But get the book, read it, everybody, write a review. I'm committing to you two. I'll write a review on it because I've read it.
Oh, thank you.
I'll
Thank you.
It'll be an international review given I'm in Canada. And
Yes.
and I want to just wrap up by saying you guys are amazing. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Tom, thank you so much for having us. This was delightful.
Yes.
We really enjoyed chatting with you. And thank you for sharing your stories, because that's not easy.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
It was marvelous and miraculous today.
I love it.
All right, everybody, find the show. By the way, find the show when it's produced. It'll be released as an international podcast on the Quiet Warrior Show. You can go find it on your favorite podcast channel now and subscribe to it. And also look for a YouTube premiere. This is something exciting. It'll be the video version of this interview, which will be set as a premiere. Make sure you get to the Tom.a YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button so you'll get that. And when you watch these episodes, rate them highly so we can honor Katie and Joan's work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, stand by.